The NHL playoffs are just around the corner and less than a month away, and it looks like the playoff picture is pretty set at this point. So I wanted to do a little bit of an early preview. Got some squad battles on in the background here while I talk about this, but yeah, the picture is pretty set at this point, except for who takes the second wild card in the East. Uh, Unless things get crazy in the West, and I mean, Calgary and Vancouver can still sneak in, but I think St. Louis probably takes that second spot and Minnesota holds their first spot. So we pretty much know what's going on with who gets in and who the contenders are at least, right? Obviously Washington and Winnipeg have clinched so far, Dallas as well. And I guess I'll start with the Eastern Conference. When it comes to the East, I think this is probably as up for grabs as things have been in a long time. And especially with the Metro, like when it comes to Washington, I don't see the Caps really as a team that is going to do any significant damage in the playoffs. Like, I know they've had a great year, and I love the Ovechkin chase. Like, I'm following the Ovechkin chase. Like, I'm loving. I mean, who isn't, right? Like, at this point, like as hockey fans, I think we're all rooting for Ovechkin to break Gretzky's record this year, and it's exciting. But when it comes to like Washington in the playoff series, I'm sorry, but if Washington ends up playing Montreal, because they would, I believe, yeah, they would play the second wild card. So if they end up playing or if Washington ends up playing Montreal, or I, if they play the Rain, I'm a Ranger fan, so I'll just say, I'm biased, but I can admit when the Rangers just aren't good, and the Rangers are not a good team right now. If by miracle the Rangers take that spot, which they still can, I don't think they will, but if they do, I I, I would take Washington in a series like that, and I think they could get through the Rangers. But if they play Montreal, I would be scared. Like if Washington had to play, I know Montreal's a young team. They haven't really proven anything, but Montreal seems like they just kind of have that aura to them right now that teams that sneak into the playoffs like last second have, but they also have like the Montreal Canadiens aura to them, which if you've been watching hockey for a while, you know that Montreal has. I mean, it literally it showed itself a few years ago when they made it to the final and lost to Tampa, but like Montreal had literally no business getting in the playoffs that year, and they did. They took advantage of a different format. They got a spot and they ran with it. And like Montreal is one of those teams that when they get in, watch out because they've gone far in the past, and it feels like if they get in this year, I would not be surprised if Montreal upset Washington in the first round, because I understand that Washington's had a great year. They've played good. They've been a great team, but recently, last 10 games are 6-3-1, so they're losing a little bit more. They're not hot going into the playoffs. Their spot punched for a little while now. They lost 8-5 to Buffalo today. I mean, Buffalo, you take these losses with a grain of salt too, obviously, because again, they've had their ticket punched to the playoffs for a little while now. So you wonder, okay, how bought in are they going to be? I don't know. I'm not seeing Washington as a team that is gonna find a way to get through the gauntlet of the East. Can they get through the first round? Yeah. Will they? I don't know. I wouldn't I wouldn't be so sure. When it comes to Carolina and Jersey, I am very sold on Carolina. I know Carolina has been very deceiving over the years because they can look great in the season and then look good in the playoffs, and then something just doesn't click. I honestly feel like with Carolina, it's just been like luck just hasn't gone their way when they need it to, and they don't get the bounces when they need them. And granted, when it comes to the playoffs, you need those things, and good teams find a way to, make the most of those bounces when they come their way. And Carolina just hasn't found a way to break through. But it seems like this year, like they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because they trade away Natchez for Rantanen, and obviously Rantanen ends up, you know, running away and going and going to Dallas, and you have all that chaos going on. But all the while, Carolina, like they just keep playing good. And Ranton leaves, and they bring back Stankoven and who else did they get in that trade? I know Stankoven was a big piece, but they basically get not much out of that Rantanen deal. Like, obviously they get futures and stuff like that, which is good, better than nothing. But they lose Rantanen and Nietzsche's, and they just kind of brushed it off, and they just keep playing good. I don't know. It's like Carolina. You want to talk about a team that has a good vibe to them right now, despite you know messing up those trades. Like I just you say it right. Like they messed up those trades. Did they get completely hosed? No, but they could have. They could have done better. They definitely could have done better, but they just keep winning, and it seems like they have a team that, like, right now, you put them in a Jersey. They beat. I don't see how they lose to Jersey. Jersey is completely depleted. You don't have Jack Hughes. You don't have Dougie Hamilton. I don't see how Jersey beats Carolina in a 7-game series. Have stranger things happened? Yes. Can it happen? Yes. Would I bet on it? No. I don't think Jersey is going to get through. I don't see it. I think Carolina's just too strong right now, and they're hot going into the playoffs too. I mean, obviously you still got 10 games left, so things can change, but I I think Carolina's playing a really good brand of hockey right now, and I feel like they can definitely they beat Jersey in my eyes, no doubt, and I like them. I think you put Carolina, like, we're gonna get to the Atlantic in a minute, but you put Carolina against any of those Atlantic teams, and yeah, I think they can hang with them. So to me, the team that probably gets out of that Metro bracket, wild card included, whoever that wild card team ends up being, I take Carolina, and I really think Carolina could probably beat one of the Atlantic teams, but will they? That I don't know. With that being said, I guess we can move on to the Atlantic now. So when it comes to the Atlantic, obviously things are up in the air, but it seems like the 4 teams that will be in are pretty much set, and it's going to be Toronto, Tampa, Florida, and Ottawa. This is like whatever combination. I mean, the combination for matchups can be, we won't know to the last day of the season probably, which is crazy, but because of how tight things are. It seems like Ottawa will stay in that wild card though, so whoever does end up getting first place will end up playing Ottawa. I would love for it to be Toronto, because that would be nuts. Battle of Ontario, have freaking Toronto and Ottawa would be unreal. I think I think Toronto gets a little too much, like, flack. Like, I think people are a little too hard on Toronto. I get it. Like, I'm not, you know, uh, the Toronto media is nuts and all that is crazy. I get that, but I think Toronto can win a round. I know that people want them to win more than a round. I think Toronto's odds, if Toronto plays Ottawa in the first round, I think they will beat Ottawa in the first round. I know people will be like, "Oh, and Ottawa is a dangerous team. They got a good vibe going to them right now." But I feel like Toronto's in a position where you put them against Ottawa in the first round, they know that, like, you can't mess this year up, and they gotta get, especially if they get, it's not a layup of a series, but compared to, like, if they had to play Tampa or Florida in the first round, Ottawa's a layup. Just comparatively, like, you take Ottawa any day of the week over either of those teams. And if Toronto ends up getting that matchup, they know, hey, like, we got to win this series. What happens in the second round against Tampa or Florida, that's obviously a different story, but I would take Toronto winning that series hands out. And honestly, if Toronto ends up matched up against Tampa or Florida, I still think Toronto can win a round against one of those teams. Like, I know, like, sometimes teams look pretty scary on paper, but the actual result when it comes to the play, like, the actual play, is different. And Florida looks as scary of a team as you can have right now. And you have the fact that they've come off, winning the cup. You're in the final, and now you make the additions that you do. You bring in Marchand, you bring in Jones, and yeah, Florida looks pretty scary, but sometimes looks can be deceiving when it comes to a team. And Toronto, like it's gotta happen at some point with them, right? Like they gotta break through, at least get to the third round. I'm not saying go to the final, but at least get to the third round. And it feels like this year, with all the doubt that they have, it reminds me very much of 2018 Washington Capitals when nobody, like everyone was just like, nah, like Washington's just never gonna do anything. Like because that was a narrative for a long time that the Caps just couldn't break through and they're never gonna get anything done and they can't get past the second round. To me, Toronto struggles in the first and now second round because they did get to the second round once. It feels very much like Washington, and then that year Washington went all the way to the final and they won the cup. It. I'm not saying Toronto does that. I don't think they do, but at least cup. But third round, I could see it. I could see them, getting through when nobody sees it coming. Especially if they get to play Ottawa in the first round. If they have to play Tampa or Florida, it will be more difficult. But look, when Washington went all the way in 2018, they had to get through Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh was, viewed as just a monster at that time. They were coming off back-to-back cups, and nobody wanted to play Pittsburgh, and Washington beat them, and that was a team that was like their kryptonite for so long. And now, actually, you look at Toronto. I mean, their kryptonite's not in the playoff picture this time around. Boston isn't in the playoffs. They're not going to get in. To me, this seems like the type of year that Toronto has to look at and be like, you know what? Why not this year? Will it happen? I don't know. It is Toronto. They usually let their fans down, so we'll see. When it comes to Tampa and Florida, I mean, what else are you going to say about Tampa? I mean, these are two really strong teams. I already talked a little bit about Florida. I think Tampa can get to the second round, maybe. But uh, it's tricky. It's tricky with them because they're so strong right now. But it's like, what's going to happen once you get to those playoffs? I would say that if the picture stands the way it is right now, you have Florida and Tampa in a series. I take Florida, but Tampa still has some of the best players in the world. Gensel has been a great fit there. It'd be hard to bet against them too. This whatever way this ends up, shaping out, the series are going to be nuts, and it can really go either way. The two teams that I pick out of this bunch to get through to at least the second round, I think would be Toronto and Florida. This is dependent on how things shape out, though. Obviously, you could have Toronto and Florida play in the first round, so that would change things. But if it ended up being that way and like Tampa ends up playing Ottawa, then yeah, obviously I would take Tampa against Ottawa. Whoever, like, I'm sorry to Ottawa fans, but I like Ottawa. I think they're a fun team. In a series against any of those three teams, I'm taking one of the three other teams. Like I don't see Ottawa getting through one of those teams just because of how strong all of them have been. I don't see it. Can it happen? Yeah. Is it likely? I don't know. I would honestly trust Montreal more just because Montreal feels like they don't belong there, and those teams are the most dangerous because those are the teams that get underestimated. Like, nobody's going to underestimate Ottawa. Everyone knows that Ottawa's a good team and they belong there. They've had a strong year, and you get to playoff time, nobody's going to be underestimating the Senators. So for my, Eastern, the way I see the Eastern Conference kind of playing out, you probably get Carolina in the conference final against either Toronto or Florida. I think Carolina can beat either one of those teams, so I would say Carolina from the East. That would be my guess. When it comes to the West, I'll do a little bit of a quicker picture here because I think it's a little more, to me, a little more clear in the West. When it comes to, I'll start in the Pacific. Vegas will probably end up, well, Vegas can, this is a little trade. Vegas can either play Minnesota or St. Louis. I take Vegas in either series. I understand that St. Louis is on a run right now, and if St. Louis ends up being the team that plays Vegas, can they Can they make it uncomfortable for Vegas? Yeah, I still trust Vegas. I feel like they're in that sweet spot right now where they're not coming off the cup, but they have won a cup before. They feel like a team that's kind of they're saving their best hockey for the playoffs. You know, they've kind of they slowed down after having a good start to the season. They went in a little bit of a, just a little bit of a lull. But those are the teams that you want to watch, like you watch out for come playoff time. That's how it feels with Vegas, at least, that they've kind of just been waiting for this time of year, and they're playing, they're still playing good hockey. They're 7-1-2 in their last 10. Feels like a team that's getting ready for meaningful hockey. So I would take Vegas either way. When it comes to Winnipeg, whoever Winnipeg plays, whether it's Minnesota or St. Louis, I'll give the benefit of the doubt to Winnipeg too, because especially if it ends up being Minnesota, Minnesota is just so injury ravaged right now, and like their season has kind of gone in just a completely, just, I won't say off the rails, but they're not looking as promising as they were earlier in the season, and obviously not because of the team got bad. It's just the team is just so hurt right now that, like, yeah, it's gonna be hard to see Minnesota winning. Say, even if guys come back, I don't know exactly what their injury situations are, but it feels like to me that Minnesota's kind of in a tough spot. Like whoever they end up playing, whether it's Winnipeg or Vegas, like I don't see Minnesota getting through either one of those teams in the state that they're in right now. Obviously, next year things might be different. They get some players in free agency. I mean, that's a conversation for another day. Focused on the playoffs right now. I would take Winnipeg beating either one of those teams. St. Louis too, because again, St. Louis is on a run. They look good right now, but there seems to be a lot of talk with St. Louis where it's like, is this the 2019 Blues? They have that type of vibe. They're running, on a nice run going in. You know, can it be? Sure. I don't feel that this team has those pieces because, that year, like St. Louis had a really good team. They had a really good team. They were just playing bad. Like if Nashville went on a run like that this year and they started off terrible and then they just kind of figured it out, I would be like, that's a team that looks like St. Louis from 2019, because Nashville should be back next year. Like obviously things were terrible this year and they were a mess, but like Nashville has a really like a solid group of players. And if would anyone have been like shocked if Nashville turned it around mid season? Obviously they didn't, but in a hypothetical where like Nashville turned around mid season in January and then they made the playoffs, people would be like, watch out for Nashville because look at their roster. Like they have really a good group of players there. St. Louis, yes, they have a good group, but I don't view like this version of St. Louis as that version that we saw win the cup in 2019. I don't personally feel like they have the guys that are going to be able, like they're do they have a Ryan O'Reilly this time around? Personally, I don't think so. So that's why I would take Winnipeg or Vegas beating either one of the wild card teams. I think that's a pretty simple, it to me it's more clear cut. Like the reason, like I think the West is a lot more clear cut than the Eastern Conference when it comes to matchups and how they, and obviously we basically know who's playing, because the East anything could still happen, so it's a little more tricky. Dallas and Colorado, it's tough, but I would go with Colorado. Like I know people, obviously Dallas has been good in the playoffs recently, but how do you bet against McKinnon and McCarr in the playoffs? Like I couldn't. I wouldn't. I would take Colorado hands down. I know Dallas is a really good team. It's not going to be easy. I won't be surprised if Dallas beats them, but for my money, I take Colorado. I don't see how you bet against those guys. And Natchez is fit in like a glove. That's a dangerous team in the playoffs for sure. And when it comes to LA, Edmonton, I'm feeling LA this time around. I feel like LA is kind of due. Like they've obviously struggled against Edmonton. Edmonton has beaten them every single time. I think this is going to be the fourth time that they play each other in a row in the playoffs. I feel like this is the most beatable Edmonton team that LA is going to play. Edmonton has not been that convincing this year with their play, and it seems like they've kind of, they've been hurt by the fact that they lost Holloway and they lost Broberg. It's not the same team from last year, that's for sure. And I think LA can beat them. I definitely think LA can beat them. I wouldn't be surprised if LA finds a way to finally, get over the hump. And then you would have a final four of LA, Vegas, at least in the West. LA, Vegas, Winnipeg, and who am I missing? Colorado. So I guess with who would be left, so that how would that shape out? That would be Vegas. So it would be Winnipeg and Colorado. Winnipeg versus Colorado, and then I'm just thinking of the brackets. So Winnipeg and Colorado and Vegas and Edmonton, or sorry, Vegas and LA. Um, I would I would take Colorado against Winnipeg, honestly, because I don't think I know Hellebuck's a great goalie, and I think he can win you a first round. Second round against McKinnon and McCarr, I don't know. I think Colorado would end up getting through. And you know what? I I'll take LA against Vegas. I think LA might be on one of those, like, they're low key right now. Nobody's really, paying too much attention to LA, but LA's had a good year. LA's had a good year. They've been a good team. They got a nice thing going there. They got a nice mix of, veterans that have done it before, and a good, good group of young players. I think LA could surprise some people this year. And I think we'd get LA Colorado in the Western Conference Final. That would be my pick right now. Picking today. And this is pretty much the picture. Like, so the Western Conference is pretty clear, like, who's gonna play who. East obviously still up in the air, but that would be my pick for the West. And who I think wins that series, man, I think LA would be able to expose Colorado finally. I think LA would be their match, and I think we could get. I'm gonna go off the board and say LA Carolina final. That would be my guess. LA Carolina. It's probably not gonna happen. We're probably gonna get Winnipeg and freaking Washington, right? I mean, that's not gonna be the first team, so it's never the best teams. You're gonna get those random teams, right? And I think Carolina they're overdue. Like, Carolina should absolutely get into a final. They are so due for a run. I wouldn't be surprised if this year's the year for Carolina to get through. And I think LA is just gonna be a surprise. Sometimes you get those years where, I mean, like Florida. Florida getting in when they did the first time around against Vegas. Nobody saw that coming. Nobody saw Florida getting all the way through, beating Boston in the first round. Like, you get those years, and I think this year could be one of those years where you see teams that, like, once you get to the final, you're like, how the heck did we get here? What happened? And I would pick Carolina. I think Carolina's due for a cup, and they've been knocking on the door for so long, and that would be my early, not so early because we're a few weeks out, but if the playoffs started today, that would be who I would pick to win. Carolina Hurricanes, 2025 Stanley Cup champions. You heard it here first. But anyway, thanks for watching. Just wanted to share my thoughts with you guys. Let me know what you think. Who's going to win the cup this year? Who's going to be good in the playoffs? Who's going to win? Who's going to get through in the East, West? Love to hear everything. Let me know in the comments down below. And I will talk to you guys again soon.